welcome to the Red Leaf Card, your home for Canadian soccer news and views. My name is Jacob, and today we're going to be talking about the new expansion team coming to the Canadian Premier League from Quebec. And it's great news for the Canadian Premier League that they have announced a new team coming in for the Canadian Premier League, and the new team will be FC Supra Du Quebec, which, as known, they used to be called Montreal Supra from the Canadian Soccer League from 1988 to 1992. So, congrats to the soccer fans out of Montreal getting a Canadian Premier League team. It was a must-need for the Canadian Premier League to have a Quebecan team. So, what we've heard about the FC Supra Du Quebec, they are hoping to develop more Quebecan players, and a lot from the Canadian Premier League. Mostly 10% of the Canadian Premier League roster have been developing a lot of minutes, and we know a lot of players that come out of Quebec have shown their quality of players. And probably for this upcoming season in 2026, FC Supra could just basically look into the market of basically getting players instantly from Quebec that have played in the Canadian Premier League. Not just that, even other players like in Ligue 1 Quebec. From starting of the season, we might see FC Supra actually do well in their first season, but it just questions from the beginning. We don't know yet of how they will start, and we'll see how it will go. I know some people would always ask that FC Supra might actually do really well from the beginning or actually be a mid-team for the season. And it'll just take time for how the season will go for 2026. I'm really interested of FC Supra for the next season for the Canadian Premier League and see its potential in being competitive. There's been a lot of mixed feelings about the logo that they're starting with, and to be honest, not really a good logo to start with. But I know some of the fans will just take it. Some of them will say worst logo of the Canadian Premier League, but just started from there and hoping probably the next seasons after that probably will make a proper logo itself but the retro logos that they had from Supra Montreal, I would have to say that maybe they will bring a third jersey, bring that logo in of FC Supra and bring in that historical jersey to the Canadian Premier League. I would have to say that a lot of fans would like that tradition of bringing up retro jersey to the Canadian Premier League and so on. And you're having the president for the FC Supra, Rocco Placentino, as the president for FC Supra, and he's excited to bringing in a Quebecan team to the Canadian Premier League. And now questions, who will be the next expansion team for the Canadian Premier League. A lot of them are still questioning about the team in Windsor. They're questioning the team probably in BC, like Kelowna, or other teams out there. Like, just say they want to bring in basically Saskatchewan. They want to bring in a Saskatchewan team. They want to bring back Edmonton also. And maybe Moncton. And also, not just that, for other teams out there, they want to bring in Quebec City. They still want to bring in that other Quebec team, Quebec City, for example, or another team in Quebec out there, and bring in that Quebec Derby in the Canadian Premier League and see how the rivals bring in out there. But starting from that, what would be a good rival for FC Supra? My eyes are basically, you have three teams out there. You have the Halifax Wanderers, you have Atletico Ottawa, and also York United in there, because you have that Montreal and Toronto rivalship that is basically a classic, and you have Atletico Ottawa, and there's going to be basically a good historical mark of a rival. But when you have another Quebec team in the Canadian Premier League, you might say that you're basically going to have a good rivalship in Quebec of the Canadian Premier League. And talk about Quebec. In British Columbia, we've seen a lot of a shocking moment in BC. It is the Canadian Championship finals. It's also making history for the Canadian Premier League. You have a last place team in the Canadian Premier League, Vancouver FC, who makes one of the biggest upsets in the semifinals. That Atletico Ottawa was to be the favorites to coming in the finals. And then you have this last place team, Vancouver FC, being in the first leg 3-1. And then later you have the second leg, basically Atletico Ottawa finishing it, ending the second leg to a 1-0, which didn't make Atletico Ottawa win in aggregates. Final aggregate score was 3-2. Vancouver FC moves on to actually versing Vancouver Whitecaps, which Vancouver Whitecaps basically plowed Forge FC in the second leg. A lot of people were basically, I think Forge FC fans are basically confused. What happened to Forge FC in that matchup in the second leg? You had a possible chance to scoring a goal, and then later you find out it's basically over. You basically find out Vancouver Whitecaps scores the first two goals. Bobby Smarionis is like, that is over. That's basically over for us. But I don't really think that Bobby Smarionis would think that just because of the first 45 minutes. I think, in my opinion, you still have those the second half of the 45 minutes, and still try to find a goal. But then later you find out, second half of that match, Whitecaps just basically ruined Forge FC's chance to make it to the finals. But you have Vancouver FC versus Atletico Ottawa. Vancouver FC makes the upset for the favors to coming into the finals. It's like this Cinderella story for Vancouver FC, and figuring out this is as noticed, the best last place team for Vancouver FC. And then later, if we see Vancouver FC pulling this off in the finals, one of the most underrated teams in the Canadian Premier League. But the real problem is for Vancouver FC is, can you really be this team to be competitive in the regular season of the Canadian Premier League? But you're really competitive in this season of 2025 Canadian Championship. You're really doing well. But now you're looking at this season of the 2025 Canadian Premier League of the Vancouver FC. What is really challenging you to not really be that competitive team? I've noticed Vancouver FC has been this team who's always been pushing their under 21 players, and they love it. They love actually developing their under 21 players. That is really good for them. And also, their young players are really that competitive. But the matter of fact is, it's not doing well. But the previous match, Vancouver FC versus York United, showed really well. And I really want to see for next season for Vancouver FC, can they pull it off? And the question, and now you're looking at the interim head coach for Vancouver FC, Martin Nash. Really questions to me, will Martin Nash be the new head coach for next season, of seeing how Vancouver FC is doing well? And that's the question. Is that hard to answer for the fans? I think Vancouver FC fans might say, let's take Martin Nash to be the head coach of Vancouver FC for the next season. And like right now, when you see Vancouver FC versus the Whitecaps, you have Steve Nash, who owns the Whitecaps. You have now Martin Nash, who's the coach for a team in Vancouver, which is Langley. I would have to say, everyone would like to see that Nash rival, who's the best out there. And, well, you're going to see those best teams out there. You might see the best Vancouver team of all time, or the best last place team in Vancouver. And that's full time of the Red League card. You can follow us on X, Spotify, and YouTube. I'm your host, Jacob, subbing out.